As a leader, you want equitable distribution for all in your community. As a private business entity, you want to make profit. And those are two very different things. If they're not going to make that big of a return on their investment to these disenfranchised communities, they have no reason, they have no motivation. There's really just no other way around it. We have to have the accountability measures there, or what has happened historically is just going to keep happening.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to another session of Tech Talks. I'm your host, Larry Ortega. Today we're going to be talking with Heather Hutto from the Bristow Public Library located in the state of Oklahoma. Heather brings to us a set of wise solutions relative to the broadband systemic challenges we are currently experiencing. Let's get into it. What do you like about what you're doing there right now?
Everything. My life's goal is to serve in rural libraries. My honest life goal, probably as a human, is to do what I can to close this digital divide. Wow. And here in my home state, serving as a library director is a really great way to do that. Because I have seen the disparities, the digital divide. I see it every day in so many aspects in rural life, in tribal rural life here in Oklahoma. We live in the information era, and so just as in the past, being able to read was a monumental occurrence in all of human history, right? In order to do anything, one needed to learn how to read. Well, in the information era, it has the same parallel. In order to do anything, in order to file your taxes, apply for a job, join the military, graduate high school, I could go on. In order to accomplish anything as a human in the information era, you have to have some sort of access and some level of digital literacy. And in communities that have been left behind, that isn't the case. And while we are increasing our technologies and our infrastructure at a breakneck speed, there are still people being left behind. And that affects everything from education attainment, workforce development, democratic participation.
Jules, even though that the physical infrastructure is there, the actual pricing precludes a lot of folks from having that high-speed internet access as well. Do you find that to be a situation similar for you guys? Is pricing at issue for you there as well?
I do, and I think there's really two facets of it. There perhaps could be more, but the two that I would say I see the most with my patrons is either one, they can only access satellite connectivity, right? And satellite internet is very cost prohibitive for many people, even people who qualify for ACF. That if you're only getting a scant discount compared to the $125 or $150 a month you're having to pay, that's just very cost prohibitive for people at that income level. Another factor that there seems to be a lack of independent ISPs and independent telecoms in Oklahoma, where I serve. They seem to just be mainstream large corporations.
It breaks my heart. Just talking to you about it right now, I feel I get really, really sad, and I'm like, man, just should not be.
I was just going to say that, and I think you and I have really, we've agreed on this statement that you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. And so some of our patrons learned about the hotspots just by being at the library and hearing about what we were doing, but it wasn't a cost prohibitive factor for them. And so they were like, wow, we didn't know hotspots were even a thing. I'm going to go get myself one now. And so we've been able, just by sharing the information, we've been able to empower our local residents to kind of take their digital equity in their own hands, right? And get connectivity where they didn't have it before.
That's an amazing story. I mean, I am completely blown away that you and your son are riding down these gravel roads and you're posting these signs, that, residents would otherwise not even know about were it not, for your efforts, And I could just see you driving down the roads with, what do you have, like a little staple gun? Just slamming them up against the telephone poles and stuff.
Staple gun and tape dispenser. Yep.
Oh my gosh, man, that is amazing. And you just do that because it's in your heart, right? You just recognize that it's something that has to get done. That's
And so I definitely feel like that's another component of the digital divide. And so some of the things that I remember discussing with you, I think at the time I was pretty frustrated because our state broadband office, I am so here for them. I feel like they have a very daunting task. And so they're trying to address this unprecedented, once in a lifetime funding, but they're also kind of maybe working by the seat of their pants, right? Because they don't have all of this organizational infrastructure themselves. They don't have all of this organizational precedent or structure themselves. Notwithstanding, I was frustrated, and I still am frustrated, because the state's broadband office, when they were posing community conversations around the state, they went to medium-sized cities instead of going to the actual rural communities and tribal rural communities that still lack infrastructure. And I understand, at best, I think that they were trying to be as pragmatic and as utilitarian as possible, right? From their perspective, they all live in the capital, in the Oklahoma City metropolitan area. And from their point of view, from their viewpoint, it's economical to drive to a mid-sized town, and let's just let all these tiny communities meet us there. Well, that makes sense logically, but you have to factor in the people in the small, tiny communities don't know about the meetings in the first place. Local media was really, really bad in my state at getting the message out. Furthermore, the Venn diagram of persons whom broadband, at least satellite, is too cost prohibitive. That Venn diagram crosses over a lot with people who don't have cable access, right? So even if the local media did release the news, it might not be getting out to those really remote rural communities that need to be hearing it. They were really active on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is an amazing platform, but the amount of patrons that I have that live out in the very fringe rural communities don't have the internet access to even pull up LinkedIn, nonetheless have a LinkedIn account, right? So there's just these communication breakdowns, and I'm so sure that they are nuanced to any rural community. What's happening here might not be the same as what's happening in West Virginia, for instance, but I can see it. I can see the people at our state's broadband office, and they're trying their best, and they're trying to push the information out, but the people on the receiving end in the rural communities, they don't know about it at all. And so I don't feel like, and there's no hard feelings here towards my state's broadband office, but I definitely feel like this once in a lifetime funding opportunity to get those people connected is going to fall short.
things like that just hits me so deep, breaks my heart, because the money's not even there were it not for these rural communities who are now not being invited to the very meetings to discuss, how we're going to distribute this. And I've heard that over and over again. And there were many people that were not at these meetings. It's the exact same thing, right? That you're telling me here. There was no need for the biggest tell, right, in Southern California is if you don't have translation services, if you're not translating the message during these meetings, then you ain't got the right people in the house. Just straight up right there, because most of that money exists because of those guys of those communities that can speak English, right? That need to hear the message in Spanish. In Pomona, 95% of the students that are enrolled are Latinos. Half of those prefer to get the message in Spanish, right? That's 10, 12,000 households, right?
Yes.
That were just excluded. Like half of the households in Pomona were just like, okay, you guys don't need to be here. Even though this money is actually for you guys, you don't need to be here because we got you, quote unquote, right? We'll take care of you. And that, not having them engaged in the conversation, it's an impossibility to say that you're going to be able to serve them. So then it goes back to, getting back to the digital discrimination thing. It sounds good, it's well intended, I think. And I want to hear your comments about that.
Well, I agree with you. I definitely think, I applaud it as a step by the FCC, especially based on, historical precedent and some of the maybe not so great decisions that the FCC has made in the past. Notwithstanding, it could be better, right? It's a move towards equity, but and perhaps I'm gonna just again echo Shelby Chair Cindy Aiden here, but there is definitely a historic precedent, and I think this is true of any location, rural or otherwise, of telecoms and ISPs saying that they're going to deliver to a rural area, and then somehow that money got, it's in a new suburban development is where that money actually got spent. And telecoms and ISPs, they already have a seat at the table, and so they already are having these conversations. They already know what words to use, and they can come up with creative explanations as to why the money went here instead of here. Furthermore, and I said this before, there is just a complete lack of independent ISPs in rural areas, right? It's monopolized by the major players. I can get up and look up my home address right now. There's no fiber where I live. There's only satellite available to me. And it's just the major corporate players that are providing that satellite service for a rate of about $125 to $135 a month.
Wow, man, that is crazy.
And, I'll just take this as a moment to say that's really not okay in states like mine, where we have really horrific weather like tornadoes. The satellite weather, I'll give you an example. Again, as I stated, I only live 10 miles from downtown Tulsa. But when we have severe weather, when we have tornadoes, earlier this year, we had a 100-mile-an-hour derecho, and we couldn't get service on our phones to even look at the weather. I have an actual weather radio that we pull out and listen to here in 2023. That's how we get information. And so that's just one more reason, right, why states with rural majorities really need this access. But the rule itself, this digital discrimination rule, I'm here for it. I love it, but it kind of lacks teeth, or at least from where I'm sitting, it appears to lack any sort of teeth, right? Like, are the FCC police going to show up? Are they going to be in black suits and actually show up at ISPs and say, we think we've heard you're discriminating here? Like, how does that work?
Right.
And then I will echo Cindy Aiden here, because I think she hit the nail on the head. And I think this aspect is not really brought up in the conversation enough. In many places, especially rural majority states, the voice of advocacy is not strong enough. I may be the loudest digital advocate in the area that I serve, and I'm not that loud. I'm not as loud and as effective as I need to be, because I am simply a library director. I hold no state office. I'm not going to the state capitol. I don't have a seat at the table of any of these conversations. I think one good way, something you said, going to these communities would be a really good caliber of indication to a state broadband office of whether or not digital discrimination may be occurring. If you go to a city or local municipality and you go to their leadership, right, their mayor or their city manager, and you ask them who their IT person is or what their technology plan is, if they lack one or either of those things, there's a pretty good chance that there's not enough infrastructure there. And if there is some infrastructure there, it probably needs improved, and there's probably other intersecting factors that are could be attributed to low digital adoption. And so those issues need to be addressed. But these aren't the conversations that are happening, right? It's almost as if this digital discrimination rule, since it lacks teeth, it's almost insulating ISPs and telecoms from overlooking these deserts, these IT deserts. I would also say that The rule says policies and practices not justified by economic feasibility. That almost gives ISPs from where I'm sitting a free pass, right? Oh, it's not economically feasible to build out past County Road, whatever, despite the fact that 20,000 people live past that road. Because, perhaps the majority of those 20,000 people are low income. But there has been a historical precedent, and it just seems like the historical precedent is going to continue. Yeah, we're giving ISPs a pass, right? To just say, oh, it's not economically feasible. It's not discrimination. It's more of an economical issue. Well, economic feasibility is not the same as profit maximization.
I loved how you are so nicely framing creative explanations. I'm just so frustrated now, just in these last couple of days when I found out that LA County might not get a dime of the BEAD dollars, and that will keep the monopolization of the services intact, if you will, if I can say it like that.
Could you better inform me about that? Because I really went home from that conversation scratching my head going, how can that be? How?
The way that it got set up, and it's much like the challenges that you face in terms of outcome or impact. They've made these rules and regulations about the maps, how the maps can get challenged. First of all, the way that they've structured it, right? Many of the local elected officials in our communities are unaware of what's going on, similar to, everywhere, right? You know that. Just as you said, right? They don't know about broadband. The mayor of Pomona doesn't even know the difference between fiber and wireless. It's not something that's on their radar because they don't understand it. And then it goes back to the issue of exactly what you were saying. 70% of the people, had a digital literacy problem. Well, that's similar to us in our communities, if not more. I rank it at 95%. 95% of our constituencies of the communities, in Los Angeles County, in this area that I'm talking to you about, are simply not aware that one, that the money exists for them, and that two, there is a big difference between fiber optics and wireless infrastructure and how that's going to happen. There's a difference as far as cost to set up and deliver and maintain over a 10-year window, and the quality of service that is the difference between fiber and wireless. The challenge is that we're going to try to get everybody to this lowest rung on the technology ladder and saying, okay, everybody is good, but that's really a plan for keeping these same communities exactly where they are, and not letting them be a part of the conversation to say, no, we want to have that better infrastructure. We want the fiber optics, and they're not equipped enough or able to understand that there's even that difference. So this whole education component thing, and why I got to you, because I saw your post on LinkedIn, and I go, man, she's pretty cool, man. She's got it going on in terms of what's needed to happen. And so I was thinking, maybe on a national level, there needs to be a stronger advocacy, like you were saying, that there's not a strong voice as far as the advocacy is concerned. And I think that's because we're not connecting the dots between us, right? Between you and I, and between the folks up in Northern California and other spaces, right? Like Cindy Aiden, and having her voice heard, with Selwyn Hollins, who is leading the County of Los Angeles, the Delete the Divide program, who actually came out and said, even if LA County got all of the money, it still wouldn't be enough to close the divide. So then you get into a space of like, okay, well, we have to plan, kind of long term. That this money is not going to be the be all to end all, but it'll be the start to create the foundation, right? But if you can't even get into the space of people understanding the difference between wireless and fiber, and you have these massive digital literacy challenges, the monopolies that are in place right now, they're good, man. They're sitting like fat cats and just like, hey, man, go ahead, kind of fight amongst yourselves and try to figure it all out. So what do we do, Heather? What are some of the things that you think that we can address? I mean, what are some of the next steps that you think that are important that we need to be taking here?
I co-authored a paper about a year ago on digital inclusivity in tribal rural areas, and I did like a sociological content analysis approach, but through the lens of knowledge management, right? And if you think about the FCC or just all players at large regarding this issue, regarding these funds, regarding this big project that we're all invested in, right? That we're all losing sleep over, right? I think we need to take that sort of approach or one similar to it so that these little tiny things, like you were saying, the connections, right? These little connections are more powerful than I think anybody realizes. And I think they speak volumes as to the hows and whys we are in this situation. And I think communities like yours and like mine are so disenfranchised and so disconnected already that perhaps our communities are out of sight and out of mind. And the nuanced issues that our communities face, like these low adoption levels, low education attainment, leadership not being aware of the significance of this funding and the investment and what it means for the future. I definitely think that needs to be addressed. That needs to be a component. There needs to be an educational component to bring everyone up to a more equal playing field. Media don't communicate effectively. And, there's a conflict of interest there because a lot of these ISPs are also telecoms that are producing local news programs. And it might not be in their best economic interest as a corporation to really be blasting information about ECF or ACP. And I'm not saying that is what's happening here, but what I will say is that, I follow local news affiliates in my region to see how often they're trying to get the word out about these programs that could really help disenfranchised people. And their dissemination of that information is quite scant. Leadership is lacking in digital literacy is one of my points. And so you saying that you have those same experiences just really solidifies that for me. And, I think there's a tendency among all Americans to go, well, if they've elected a leader who's not that educated, that's their problem. And that's couldn't be farther from the truth. Right? There are various reasons why somebody could be an elected leader and why they could be qualified to serve as leader. There are types of information, there are types of knowledge, and we have plenty of people who are more than qualified serving in leadership. They just missed that memo, right? They didn't get that instruction. They still don't understand why this infrastructure is important and why information and technology literacy is important. And then finally, again, I think the FCC is doing really great things right now, and I support what they're doing right now, but they don't have the best track record, right? Allowing ISPs to self-report all those years has largely contributed to how and why we are here right now. At least turning a microscope to these very more specific issues and making sure everyone is aware of these issues so we can start creating solutions for these issues will help the overall picture. This digital divide dilemma is much larger than the decisions of ISPs or the decisions made by broadband offices, right? We have to take a deeper approach instead of a topical one.
That's really good. The implementation of actual metrics and parameters at the local level to say, these are the points that y'all got to be hitting. That has to be something that needs to be instituted and set up as kind of like law. If we're saying that broadband is a utility as on the same level of import as water and electricity, then we need to have those same kind of metrics and parameters in place for it so that we can make sure that the community at large understands what's going on. I think you're on to something big here, Heather.
Broadband's a utility, right? And those who don't I would like to point out Wilma Mankiller, Cherokee Nation Chief Wilma Mankiller. There were neighborhoods, there were communities within Cherokee Nation that lacked running water well into the 1980s.
Wow.
She was a remarkable leader because she was a true believer in equity, and she solved these issues and she figured out ways to address them, right? Even if it meant she rolled up her sleeves and got a shovel and dug the trench for the pipe herself.
Wow.
That is the kind of ingenuity and dedication and focus that we need to see, not just at the state level, not just at the federal level, but at the local level. And it's one thing to call a spade and accuse somebody of, you should be better educated or you should be more prepared. But at the end of the day, that does nothing. I think we really need to be as inclusive as possible and as patient and as understanding as possible with those key players that may have low digital awareness or digital readiness themselves, because they're still key players. So the best thing that we can do is try to educate them, also incentivize or find other means, put teeth in policy and regulation to kind of get them there, right? To get them where they need to be. If we relied on private mega corporations to handle water distribution, electric distribution, if we didn't regulate those things, if we didn't have parameters in place like we've been discussing, if we just really kind of gave the ISPs a pass and let them have more of a say in this equation, those utilities, in this case broadband, is going to continue to not be distributed equitably. Because as a utility, as a leader, you want equitable distribution for all in your community. As a private business entity, you want to make profit. And those are two very different things. Well, again, I think your community and my community have a lot of similarities, and they have some differences too. But I see it as well, Barry. I definitely feel like the major players who represent the ISPs in my state, because again, we lack independent ISPs compared to other states. I think they're not hurting for business, and maximizing profits is what they're all about. And are they really going to get that big profit, that big return on investment, if they're building out to a community that they already know is low income and they already know is going to be subsidized through programs like ACP? And so I'm not qualified. I don't represent an ISP. I've never worked for an ISP, but it would definitely seem like if they're not going to make that big of a return on their investment to these disenfranchised communities, they have no reason, they have no motivation for that build out. Putting some teeth into some of these policies and rules, having some accountability measures. There's really just no other way around it. We have to have the accountability measures there, or what has happened historically is just going to keep happening.
I mean, those are the facts. The AT&T and Verizon, they were paid billions of dollars. They did not upgrade. They took the money. They did something else with it. Should they be obligated to maybe give that money back, or be punished, or play some kind of role in trying to reconcile their account, if you will, on that aspect? And should there be an investigation to learn more about, where that money went, what happened? I
definitely think so. As a library director who files E-rate for my library, if I mess up, the consequences are very, very high, right? If I misstep, if I do something illegal regarding the USAC program and E-rate funds that, empower schools and libraries to get internet access, I might not only have to pay fines and fees and have court dates, but I may have to retroactively pay all E-rate funds we've ever been given, right? I'm one person with the world on my shoulders, and I still can't misstep. They are a massive corporation with, I don't even know how many people work at major ISPs, but the resources are there, right? The resources are there. There's really no excuse for any kind of missteps or mistakes to be made. And so if if major ISPs mess up, if they make a mistake, if we're going to hold such a strict level of accountability on schools and libraries for the subsidized internet that they use, it does not make sense on any scale to not apply the same level, the strict adherence to rules and regulations on our ISPs. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
I love that. I love it. Awesome. That's exactly, I mean,
It's
so,
like, how is it fair, right? Like, I'm
yeah.
one person doing the job of many, but there's so much on the line if I mess up. They have every resource they could dream of and then some. But if they mess up, it's like, meh.
Yeah, we'll figure it out later, or, not as important.
Yeah, or, this will get swept under the rug and then nobody will address it in the future. This will just fall into the history books, if you will.
Man, it's happening at an institutional level right now, at a systemic level, where the AT&T now is wanting to shut off all of the copper lines. And
Yes.
and so what happens with that is that all of the records and all of the history, will just go away, and they'll just be like, yeah, bye-bye, see you later. And it's all part of a kind of a master plan, a master, conspiracy, if you will. And I hate using that word, but I mean, it really is. It's just something that is happening. And there's not, they have all of the players that are in place at the regulatory agency, and from the governor's office, who appointed his right-hand man to be the right-hand lady to be the president of the California Public Utilities Commission, after some scandal had hit that one of the former executive directors within that regulatory agency here in California had found that somewhere between $200 and $300 million had went unaccounted for, that were collected by the phone companies for specifically for fiber upgrades, among other things. But that was one of the big things. And the regulatory agency who was responsible for saying, did they collect that money? Did they spend that money appropriately? All the things that you're saying. I mean, why is the accountability to the small person so, like, to the gnat's eyelash, and for these big guys, it's like, oh, oh, well, I mean, they actually didn't get there. So to your point, the accountability, the explanation, like, reconcile this, majority leader or Mr. Governor, reconcile this for us. Why are they not being held to that same standard, particularly when, California is going to receive $1.83 billion from BEAD for this very issue? We need to make sure that their books are right before this new money hits. Why would you not want to do that? What's the good rationale for not wanting to have that kind of accountability there, right?
Right. This is all happening so fast. These things that need to be in place for all of these funds that are coming down the pike at breakneck speeds, our systems need to be ready to do something productive with those funds, right? And if we have issues like the one you've just described, I don't see how anyone in leadership could then turn to their constituents and say, like, yes, I am stewarding these federal funds well, have no doubt, when historical precedence has proven otherwise. And, the old adage, we are doomed to repeat history if we don't learn from it. So, my question is this: state leaders, federal leaders, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? All this amount of money is for nothing if we don't do this right.
Love it. Let's end on that note. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. That is wonderful. What a pleasure it's been speaking with you, Heather. I really appreciate your time that you're investing with me and this message.
Well, Larry, I have to thank you because, I spew this stuff all the time, and most people are like, oh, there she goes again on her soapbox. So it is So thank you for giving me the time and the space. And I've just learned so much about the similar challenges that your community is facing. I feel like the answer is in there somewhere, right? If all of the us's, all of the disenfranchised communities could come together and learn from each other, there's got to be a way out of this. And thank you for being an ally and a voice. For those of us who feel so alone and siloed, it gives us hope.
Please like the video and subscribe to our channel today.